One of the things you quickly learn at Urban Elements is that we love all of the holidays. My favorite holiday is Christmas, and I'm going to get an early start this year by making some stockings to help decorate my home. We have two finished samples here. This particular one is burlap, and we used a Season's Greetings laser cut and prefused applique on the burlap. This particular one is canvas, and we used Santa's Little Helper cats, and this also comes as dogs and mice, this particular pattern. The pattern download is available on our website at urbanalements.com, and I'll have the link in the description for this video. The download includes both the pattern and the instructions for assembling the basic stocking, and you can use the fabric of your choice. What you're going to get with the pattern download is the basic stocking pattern. This comes out as 4 sheets and needs to be assembled, which is pretty basic. It has both the dark line, which is your cutting line, and the dotted line will be your sewing line with your seam allowance. The pattern also comes with the instructions for the assembly of the pattern and the assembly of the stocking. Now you could use a light box to trace off a single pattern with this, or you could just use, I used poster board on mine just because I knew I was going to make several stockings and it was easier for me to trace around. One thing that I would like to point out is that sometimes printers don't always print exactly the right size according to what we design the pattern. So this top piece right here is a very important measurement because it has to match the cuff. And what I wanted to show you is I had to increase the size of my cuff just a little bit to make sure that it matched the top edge of my stocking. Now this fabric is doubled over, so what you would need to do is take this measurement and multiply it by 2 to make sure that the length of your cuff is long enough. Other than that, this is a pretty straightforward pattern, and we'll go to the next step. What I did, I have 2 pieces of fabric here. These are both cotton fabrics. I am just using fat quarters in this case. And I pinned the 2 pieces together after I ironed it, which just kind of helps keep them both in place. And all I'm going to do is trace very quickly around this pattern to get my both of my pieces for my stocking. Now I'm just using a water-soluble pen here, but it doesn't really matter because these are just the cutting line. They won't be visible anywhere on the stocking. And I hope that's clear enough for you to see from here. But now all I'm going to do while these are both pinned together is just cut these out. I'm going to continue cutting out this shape, and I'll meet you over at the sewing machine. I've used my template to cut out my pieces of fabric. I have my double layer of fabric here. These are solids, so I didn't have to worry about putting right sides together, but that's how you would sew it, with the decorative sides, right sides together. And what I'm going to do is use the edge of the cut line and my 1/4 inch foot to create my seam allowance. Now I was a little bit jagged on my cutting, but I'm not going to worry about that because I'm just using that edge as my seam guide. It's not going to be visible in the finished project. If you need to pivot to go around the corners, you could do that. I would recommend using the needle down position so that you don't slip out of place. And I need to do that right now. There we go. I did have the two pieces pinned together so that they will stay both layers together, but also I ironed one piece on top of the other, and I used a little bit of starch, and I think sometimes that helps kind of fuse the two pieces together so they don't slip and slide as much. Now after I get finished sewing this on some of these curves, I will make some little slits in the side, or little darts, just to be able to turn the fabric so that there isn't any little puckers along the edge where the curve is. That is my one piece of stocking. Now this is going to be the top for this, the little cuff, and you can see my stocking cuff is long enough to meet the edge of the stocking as well. So this is folded right sides together as well, and I'm just going to sew the short end down this seam to create a little loop, a little circle of cuff. And again, I'm just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm just going to repeat that whole process on an additional stocking while I have the machine set up, and then we'll go to the next step. Who knew making stockings could be so fast? I've got Christmas music playing in the background. I think it's kind of nice to be able to stream Christmas music all year long. It helps put me in the mood. With all that's going on in the world, I'd rather listen to Christmas music. Now we're coming up to the home stretch, and I'm going to race to the finish line. Meet you at the iron. When you're finished sewing your stocking seam together, you can go ahead, and I put some slits on the side, but I also did some little darts going around the curved edges. I think that just helps to make the curve go a little bit nicer. Also on your cuff here, I just sewed or ironed the seam allowance open. I don't know that it really makes a big difference. It was just what I thought would be the easiest, so they have the bulk evenly distributed. And the first thing you're going to do is turn this inside out. Well, not all the way inside out, you're folding it. And I just use my seam there to help me get that equal all the way around. And this fabric kind of makes it look like it's lopsided, but that's the pattern, I assure you. And at this point also, I just like to make sure that I catch my edges. So I would just use a little bit of a glue stick to get the two top edges matching up on each side, just to make sure I catch that in my seam allowance. Because I know a lot of times, even with binding, when I have a double layer of fabric, a lot of times one side will slip out and then I won't catch it in my seam. Now I wouldn't iron this bottom fold here, because once we get this onto the stocking, that may not be the exact same crease by the time we flip it inside out and iron it. So I would wait to press that until it's finished. The next thing we're going to do is turn our stocking inside out to get it ready. And you'll notice that I was just in a creative mood, so I used two different fabrics on both of my stockings. This particular one reminds me of the Grinch because of the colors I used. Also, the two different colors in my case kind of gives me a couple different options as to where I use it or who I give it to, so I could decide which side I decorate. And at this point you could iron that a little bit if you wanted to, but you'll probably want to take a little bit more time than I did to get that curve out. After you get to this point, got a crease in there, we have this the right way that it's going to go, and we have our cuff the right side out. And what we're going to do is tuck this cuff inside the stocking. And again, I would probably use my glue stick just to help a little bit, but you can also pin or clip however you like to do it. But I would just get this right to the edge. I'm going to use some clips here. I really like the glue stick because it really prevents the fabric from slipping when you're not looking. When you're finished, you really can't see the cuff tucked inside. But when you open, you'll see the cuff perfectly lined up to the raw edge of the stocking. Now what we're going to use on the sewing machine, I'm going to take the table cover off and just use my free arm system to do a 1/4 inch seam right on this edge. And then after we're done, we'll be able to flip the stockings right side out and get it pressed and ready for decorating. Now I'm going to be using the free arm system on my sewing machine. I have my cuff tucked inside the stocking and it's ready to be sewn in place. I used just some clips. You could pin also, however you're comfortable, but I'm just going to use the 1/4 inch seam on this edge and sew all the way around the circle. I also utilized a little bit of glue stick just to help prevent any slipping on the fabric. But I will tell you, one of the nice things about the way the cuff comes over the top of the quilt or the stocking is that if you get a little tiny pucker on the top of the stocking, it's not going to show at all because you have a really plentiful cuff that's going to cover the top, and by the time it gets down to the stocking itself, you wouldn't see any evidence of a pleat. But mine came off really nice. When you're finished sewing this cuff to the stocking, this is pretty much what it will look like. And then what you do is you just go ahead and pull the cuff out of the stocking, and I like to iron the seam allowance down towards the stocking because that's the way that the cuff is going to go, and it just prevents any little bulk puffing out your stocking. And then when you're finished, you just go ahead and fold the cuff down, and it'll take you a couple minutes to get that where you want it. You won't have to rush like I do. And now you could go ahead and iron. Here's my second one. And these are all double-sided in color. Just gives me a couple of decorating options. But however you decide to pull yours together. Now these two are just plain cotton. This is a real nice light batik. But now my stockings are ready to decorate or to hang, depending on what you want to do with it. And up next, I'm going to show you how I use some of the laser cut pre-fused applique shapes from applique Elements to decorate these.